This show is provided for entertainment and informational purposes only. It should not be relied upon as legal, business, investment, or tax advice. Neither the hosts, guests, nor any funds they may manage intends to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies.
Please speak as you might to a young child or a golden retriever.
It's an unfair game.
They're schemers. Schemers trying to control their little worlds.
The rich get richer, that's the law of the land.
It's just money.
Blasphemy! This is madness!
I drink your milkshake.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Milkshakes Markets Madness. This is a show myself, John Kutzmita, and my friend here, Brent Johnson, do at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. The Milkshakes piece is about the dollar milkshake theory, which Brent came up with to describe the financial system. If you want to learn more about that and maybe have some context about some of the things we talk about here, you can go to milkshakespod.com and get all the information you need there. But right now we're going to jump right into it. Brent, we are kind of talking before getting on camera about madness. We haven't really spent a lot of time lately on the madness piece of the show. It's been more about markets. And one of the things that I found maddening was the back and forth drama that's going around the Twitter blue check mark.
Oh yeah, totally. This is a good time to talk about the madness regarding something as simple as an $8 blue check mark is really something to witness. Yeah,
so there is a B-list comedian by the name of Sam Morrill. Now, I think Sam is really funny, but I don't mean to knock him by saying B-list, but I consider A-list like your Chris Rocks, your Chappelle's, your Bill Burr's. He's definitely up and coming, clever comedian, but he posted, he had a tweet basically mocking the blue check mark as the type of people who buy class rings. And then he did a snapshot of that tweet on his Instagram stories and put a comment, Twitter is dead with a peace sign, like he's over it now. I think that's the funniest thing ever, because not that he's actually being funny, but he would post something as silly as that, because this whole like Twitter is dead thing over $8 really is so maddening. And the funny part is they're not going anywhere. So everyone just, mostly the celebrities, it just shows that they like need to throw this temper tantrum that they don't feel special for once in their life.
Yeah, it very much reminds me of all the people that were going to leave the United States if Donald Trump ever got elected. But, you know, they're all still here. And it goes back to, you know, everybody says, oh, we're going to leave Twitter. We're going to go over to Getter or, you know, Truth Social or whatever it is, whatever competing social network. And yeah, they go over there for a few days. But the reality is everybody comes back because Twitter's where the game is. And there's nothing more ironic than tweeting about how much you hate Twitter on Twitter, right? I mean, it's just the whole meta, the meta going around in that is a sight to behold. And I have friends on both sides of this issue. I have friends that absolutely hate Elon Musk, hate what he's doing to Twitter, but they're on Twitter every day. And then I have the other people who have the blue check mark. They're happy to pay the $8. They don't think it's that big a deal. Like I've got the blue check mark. I'm happy to pay the $8. I get a heck of a lot more than $8 worth of entertainment out of Twitter in a month. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. And when they first rolled out Twitter Blue, it was maybe half the price of $8. Either way, it's inconsequential in the bigger picture, but it was more about the fee at the time. It was for me more about the features. I wasn't getting a check mark out of it. There was the bookmark folder organizing you could do. You can, at the time, you could do up to 10 minutes of video, which I thought was also valuable, especially when you're doing different types of content like this, to be able to take a clip that's 5 minutes and provide value to people by sharing that. I thought was interesting. Now you can do, I think up to an hour or something ridiculous like that. What a lot of people don't realize is they kind of go into these fits, like you're taking away my McRib sandwich type of deal, right? And it's, when you understand some of the steps and moves he's making versus what his competition is. So all of these social media platforms, the only real value they they have is the size of the network. And when you're looking at it from a standpoint of one, whether it's Snapchat or Instagram or any of these TikTok, they're all the same. It's just features. And as soon as someone like Snapchat has their disappearing message feature, Instagram comes out with stories or reels or their own disappearing message feature. So they're all just copycats of each other. And that's why I don't think you're going to have someone come in and knock off the incumbent, because the network is already there. The conversations are already there. And I think what Elon's probably trying to achieve here is multiple steps ahead in terms of business strategy. You're verifying people. You're building this master list. You're creating residual income, cash flow. I get it. And I think all these people, once they get over their ego, they're going to pay the $8. Otherwise, they can go pound sand. And I think it's funny when they start acting like it's for their fans' protection. Like how people are going to be engaging with, phony Melissa Milanos.
Well, it's not just that. Like, I agree with everything you said. The part that I just crack up is like the people that just cannot handle anything Elon. Like the guy cannot. The guy can't even walk correctly. He can't walk correctly. He can't talk correctly. He can't. Everything is wrong with him. And listen, I'm not a fan of Elon Musk. I think I'm kind of indifferent, to be honest. I'm not a hater, but I'm not like a big fan of his. But I can have a conversation about him without completely losing my mind. But a lot of people can't.
Yeah, I would say I'm indifferent as well. It's more just the spectacle, which again I think is really Twitter's magic value, and he's doing such a good job of stirring up the conversation.
It's the circus,
about
right? It's the Coliseum. It's the bread and circuses.
Yeah. So Elon's the new Barnum and Bailey. Speaking of madness, another interesting conversation is somewhat fresh in the last couple of days. So I haven't really dove into this, even though I'm in the mortgage space, because I feel like dumb things like this come up all the time. But this conversation about the loan level price adjustments to subsidize crappy borrowers. Have you done any reading on this yet?
I've done a little bit of reading on it, and but it's funny because I read it and I thought to myself, this is so ridiculous. But I also, because it's so ridiculous and because of the times we're in, I'm like, yeah, of course it's true. And then in talking to you were like, I'm not even sure if it's true. And then it actually made me stop and think. It's like, is this true? But this is the perfect example of the times we are in. Things have gotten so turned upside down that you're just not sure anymore. But the idea that you should get punished and pay a higher rate if you have a good credit score, and then get subsidized if you have a worse credit score, and if you're going to buy a house or your credit rating or whatever it is, it's so asinine, John, that I don't even know where to begin with it.
Well, look, we'll preface that we're not fans of the current administration, but we are somewhat apolitical. But this seems very par for the course in so many things that this administration is doing. And I just don't think, much like your attitude is towards central bankers not being dumb but arrogant, I really question that is there a strategy here? Like what part of the puzzle are they trying to play here? Because I can't, like you're saying, it's when things like this are so illogical and make no sense, I start going almost like conspiracy, like what are they up to?
Well, this is the part where I don't think maybe more central bankers with politicians. I would put central bankers on a higher intelligence scale than politicians. But it does get a little bit into the whole ivory tower situation. A lot of times these central bankers or these politicians, they think that they can change one thing and everything else will just stay the same. But the reality is in a dynamic market, when you change one variable, it causes all the other variables to change as well. So the idea that, you can just all of a sudden start subsidizing the lower credit score people with the higher credit score people and not have any adverse consequences, it is pure political madness, ivory tower gibberish. And the reality is it will have incentives. Like, what's the incentive to save, to be fiscally sound, to pay your bills, to get a high credit score? Like, what's the incentive? part of the reason to do that is you do get better rates. Part of the reason to, work on your credit score and try to do things the right way and build a sound financial life is so that you do get a little benefit out of it. But if you take those benefits away, you're going to change people's actions. And this is what I think that politicians and monetary authorities and people in power often forget. They think that they can just mandate something and it will automatically work the way they have it drawn up on a piece of paper. It's crazy.
Well, this kind of falls in line with the idea that a lot of what central banks have been doing and the Federal Reserve in general is just one big experiment. And if you're going to take the last, let's say, 30 years as an example, based on what you just said, one would say that, there's been this punishment of savers, and all of the asset wealth and wealth growth in general has gone to people who've taken risks, and unapologetically so. So this feels like another one of those, like, you keep flipping things upside down on its head, and there's going to be these unintended consequences that aren't going to be for sure any better than what we saw happen in markets the last 30 years.
Yeah, and like I said, it kind of goes along with the whole zeitgeist that we're in right now. And I think, a lot of people have heard us talk about the fourth turning, or there's some kind of a great reset, or that the, institutions are being, historical institutions are being overthrown, and, dogma's coming down, and everything's kind of in a process of change. And I suppose this is just kind of part of it, right? Like, everything that makes sense gets thrown out, and you go through this period of turmoil, and then hopefully at some point we're going to come out the other side and some logic is going to prevail. But, unfortunately, me, I think we're probably going to have more madness before we have less of it. But, every day you wake up, you read something new, you hear something new, and you almost have to question everything because it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's a good way to transition to something else that has happened this past week. And it does feel like there's a bit of the fourth turning has become like a dragged out cliche almost at this point, but
yeah,
if you kind of understand the core concept, it makes sense. I mean, how many people actually think like their parents, right? So you're going to have these societal changes as the demographics change, and a new generation, kind of comes into being able to, make the rules and the lifestyles that they want. And so what we're seeing, at least I'm starting to see something interesting here when it comes to crypto. There's still a lot of uncertainty around what the SEC and now the CFTC came in with, I forget who they were trying to muscle around with some of these exchanges and whatnot. But you had a senator from Ohio, Warren Davidson. He kind of took it to Gary Gensler and put this whole thing together to have him removed. And then there was another senator that came out and was talking about stable coins. And there seems to be now a narrative growing that we get that certain regulations needed. You have things like FTX and all the other shady stuff that went on in crypto. But shady stuff went on anytime you inject trillions of dollars into the system. But now we're starting to kind of see that dust settle. And this shift, this sea change of digital currencies and all the things that are going on with DLT and blockchain technology, you can't ignore that this is now, whether it's just the temporary zeitgeist, it's here, it's part of the narrative. And so it's interesting to see how politics is now, because politicians just want to survive, right? So they're gonna do, and a lot of people forget this, they're gonna do what the loudest voice screams at them to do. And it seems that the voice is getting loud enough for some of these senators to start trying to chip away at this system that has, most systems do, but ours particularly has been very resistant to change.
Yeah, to your point, anytime a politician feels like he can get up and, pound his fist or shake his hand and make a point, he's going to do it because that's how he gets likes on Facebook or Twitter, or that's how he gets on the news. That's how he gets his face on the cover of the Washington Post or whatever it is. And then that helps him get reelected, right? So it doesn't really matter what the issue is, as long as they think they can make a point. What I find most interesting about this topic, there's kind of a duality that I want to talk about here, because I think anybody who has kind of followed me for the last couple of years knows that I'm not a huge fan of crypto, but I'm also not totally against it. I actually don't have a problem with it per se. I don't think it's going to be as successful and as many people think it will be, but I don't think it should be banned. So that's the duality. Like I'm somebody who believes in liberty and, you should, free competition, and the more competition, the better. And free markets, I think, are great. And from that perspective, I think crypto should be allowed in my opinion, should be allowed to at least attempt to be successful. But what I find funny, there's two things coming back to this is, when the U.S. was founded, the Constitution was written that said what the government could do. It wasn't said what the people could do. And over time, that's kind of been flipped, and now all the laws tell the people what they can do, not necessarily what the government can do. And so SEC is part of the government, and they've said there are certain things that you cannot do. You cannot sell private, as an example, you cannot sell private securities to the public and advertise them, et cetera, et cetera. Well, if the head of the SEC is under testimony or is testifying to the Congress, and a congressman asks them if Ether is a security, and the head of the SEC cannot give him an answer, that's a problem, right? If he can't give an answer, then who the hell can, right? And how can you get in trouble or be prosecuted for something that even the head guy can't tell you for sure whether or not you're doing something wrong? So that's the first part of it. But the second part of it is this shouldn't surprise you. Because governments don't have to make sense because they have the power. They're going to do stupid shit. They're going to do stuff that doesn't make sense. And the reason they're going to do it is because they can, right? And I don't like it, and you don't have to agree with it. And perhaps, the public will push back and they will get this changed. But I don't think people should be surprised by government agencies overstepping their authority. And I think as we kind of go through, again, this fourth turning, as we have this, as things kind of ratchet up and get more heated, I think you're going to see more and more of this. And over the last couple of years, I've never said that I thought that the government would quote unquote ban Bitcoin. And I've never said that it would even be successful, that they could do it if they wanted to. But I have said that they will absolutely push back, and they won't just stand by and let Bitcoin and the private stablecoins take over the monetary system. And I think, this whole, what do they call it? Operation Wind Up or whatever. What's the whole thing where they've been kind of going after crypto? Operation Slowdown, or I can't even remember the name. But there's been this theory that the government.
Let's just call it Operation Deep Throat.
Operation Deep Throat. But I think, and it's kind of this conspiratorial thing, but I think there's some truth to it. I think the government is trying to clamp down. I think they don't like competition. They don't like the success they've seen in the private, currency or digital coin, or however you want to define this market. They don't like the competition. They don't, and they are going to seek to regulate it. Now, whether they should be able to or not, that's a whole other subject. The point is they're going to. And they have a lot of tools to which to do that. But I do think it's very hypocritical for them to do this, and then, the head of the SEC can't even tell another congressman or another member of the government whether or not Ether is a security.
Yeah, it's a lot of soapbox and arm waving. It's a classic Simpsons meme, old man, shouts at a cloud. Yeah. There was this gentleman, Austin Campbell, gave a testimony or speech at the House Financial Services Committee talking about stablecoins. I should have known this guy wasn't in government, because when you listen to this clip, it's like 2 minutes and it's just so on point. And I was like, wow, that's pretty good for someone in government. But it turns out he's just an entrepreneur type. So that makes a heck of a lot more sense. But what's interesting about this short little message he had, he does highlight the fact that, there's issues with stablecoins, say like, the shadowy type like Tether, but a lot of what stablecoins provide and offer already exist and have existed in the financial system. So it goes back to kind of your point about like, what's Ether, Ethereum, is it a security? Well, not all stablecoins are, funding terrorism. Yep. And are these shady, bankrupt systems like potentially Tether is. But, given the amount, obviously, of time and energy you spend on the liquidity of the financial system, the plumbing, the euro-dollar system. What do you think, how important do you think CBDC let me take that back. Sorry. How important do you think a stable coin that we can all trust as a stable coin? It doesn't have to be a CBDC, because I think there's a duality there where people get so worked up about government's going to track everything we do, yada, yada. But maybe it's a stable coin that we actually trust and can verify and audit as one-to-one. What kind of power do you think that continues to provide the U.S. as, reserve currency as we enter this digital paradigm?
Well, so there's a couple things here. So far, the proliferation of stable coins. I think some people have initially thought that it's anti-dollar. It's going to, undermine the current monetary system. In my opinion, stable coins, and you can go and you can look at all the stable coins in the world, and you can look and see what they are attached to, what they are backed by. And 99% of the stable coins in the world are backed by US dollars, or allegedly backed by US dollars. And so in my mind, they've done nothing but solidify the dollar as the global reserve currency, as opposed to challenge it. And I think what they've done, these stablecoins, what they've done is they have shown the government and these big monolithic industries that have no competition are not very innovative, right? And so what I think stablecoins have done is shown the government that there is a much more innovative way, much more efficient way, and technology has evolved in a way that can allow the monetary system to be faster, better, quicker, more stable, more secure, all these things, right? But again, so to your point, is it a positive? Yeah, I think it's a positive thing, but especially when it comes to money, and money more than any other topic, the government does not want competition. So in my mind, they will eventually roll out their own Fed coin or whatever it is, right? Their own CBDC. And when that happens, they are not going to allow, in my opinion, they are not going to allow. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't exist anyway, and it doesn't mean that the government can necessarily shut it down. But in my mind, the government won't let other US dollar stable coins exist without, trying to hamper their ability to operate in some form or another, because they will figure that they have the stable coin now, right? Their Fed coin or whatever it is the ultimate US dollar stable coin, especially if it can interact with these different systems around the world. And I would also argue that if that's the case, and it is, and the government can always print the dollars, right? And so they will definitely have enough dollars to back theirs. Which would you choose? Would you choose a shadowy stablecoin that isn't verifying and you can't audit the actual dollars they have behind the stablecoin, or would you use the Fed Now coin? Now, I've got a lot of problems with CBDCs, and I've got a lot of problems with the idea of a Fed coin. But on this particular point of it, I'm just saying, would you rather have the private security, or would you rather have the one that's backed by the U.S. government? Now, I know a lot of people say, I don't want the one backed by the U.S. government. But my guess is there's a lot of people out there, especially the ones that are less educated or not as up to date on this stuff, is they would say, sure, if it's the one that's guaranteed by the U.S. government, that's the one I'll take. But regardless of which side you fall on, I just don't see a situation in which the U.S. government has their own U.S. dollar stablecoin and they are letting private securities freely compete with them. I mean, it kind of goes against the whole legal tender laws, and the time and time again, historically, whenever a private currency has kind of tried to compete with the U.S. government, they go in and shut them down hard. And so I would expect that trend to continue.
Yeah, so the pushback there is, I want to speak for you here for a minute and just say everything that you're saying is more about, the incumbent doesn't give up that power, not that the CBDC you would believe in across all aspects. I think the main thing that most people are concerned, as would you be, is the anonymity component. Like you no longer have any privacy in terms of what you're doing. Now, it's funny because we started the show talking about Twitter and Twitter being what it is, mainly because first mover, it has this big network, all these things that these bigger social media platforms have. One of the things I think people so often forget, especially in a place like Twitter where a lot of these conversations are festering, is it's still like less than 1% of the population is participating in these conversations. So whatever ultimately gets rolled out, and I have this big debate with my friends who are, let's call them crypto deans, right? They're they're so deep in the weeds on this that they don't realize the multiple layers of friction that they have crawled through to get to the point where they're now so deep in the weeds in this game that the person who's needs to be indoctrinated for the first time generally can't even remember the password to their email, right? And so when you start destroying the fiat on-ramps, like the way that all these exchanges are getting closed down, what ends up winning across all businesses, especially in technology, is who's creating the most value and who's making it the easiest. Now, that's not to say that the government, rolls things out perfectly, but they have the ability to impact as many people as quick as anybody doing anything. Yeah. So that is a concern, because obviously they want to maintain their power. If they feel like FedCoin, they need to, something to do that, they're going to be able to infiltrate the system faster than a libertarian version of that.
Right.
The other thing too on that though is when you're looking at some of this that's going on as far as the central bank digital currencies and some of the control that they want to have, and like you're saying, it's this legal tender issue. Is there a version of that where it's just a digital version of what we have now, where, again, this is another one of these underlying granular bits about a Fed CBDC, is now all of a sudden they circumvent how the banking system is set up. Right now, the ones who can create money are commercial banks. They're the ones that create credit and therefore create money. A CBDC then takes all that power and puts it into the Fed's hands. Is there a new digital version of that where the banks aren't necessarily issuing a CBDC, but maybe it's JP Morgan coin that is one-to-one?
Well, I think this is where it's going to get very, very interesting. When CBDCs finally roll out, in many ways, well, you got to be very careful how I say this. The banks become less necessary, right? Because right now, the part of the reason that banks exist, or at least the primary dealers exist, is that is how the public gets money to the Treasury, and the Treasury gets money to the public. The banking system is the money distribution system to the economy and to the country, rather than the Treasury Department doing it. But if the Treasury Department has their own digital coin and everybody has an account directly with the Fed or with the Treasury or whoever it is, in some ways the Treasury can just go straight to the people. They don't really have to go through the distribution system anymore. It's kind of like when Twitter came out. You remember when Obama first started running in like 2008, and he would use social media, and he was heralded as this genius, because he was skipping the newspapers, he was skipping the TV shows, he was skipping the traditional media and talking directly to the people. It's kind of like that. A digital coin or a CBDC potentially allows the government to go straight to the people with the money rather than using the traditional the banking system. And I think this has the potential, and I haven't quite figured it out yet, but it has the potential to cause a big battle between the Fed and the Treasury. Because the Treasury, if they are going to be the issuer of the coin, the Fed would, I think, be the custodian of it, but the Fed represents the banks, right? And if the Fed is representing the banks and the banks aren't really needed anymore, do we get some kind of a merger of Fed and Treasury, and the banks kind of become utilities? And maybe they allow some banks, maybe they license a few banks to issue their own coins, but I do not think it would be a case where they would allow just any bank to issue their own coins. I think that would almost go back to like wildcat banking or wildcat banking back in the 1800s that had all kinds of problems or led to all kinds of problems. Again, I would actually like that. Free competition of currency. But the idea that the government is going to allow that to go back to that, I think is wrong. So I think this whole digital currency, central bank digital currency, is it issued by the Treasury? Is it held by the Fed? What's the bank's role? To me, this is the big wild card over the next 5 years. I haven't quite figured it out yet, but I think there's a potential battle brewing that many people just don't quite realize yet. Now, I think there could be a big battle between the Fed and the Treasury.
That's I love the open-endedness of that, so that we can kind of let the community jump in tell their side of the story, probably tell you're an idiot, and hopefully continue.
That's a given.
Hopefully continue this conversation, because instead of, giving our perspective and thoughts specifically on markets, I feel like this was kind of an open-ended conversation, inviting feedback. And let's be very clear, nobody knows. So share us your thoughts, but chill on the dogma. We're all here to learn, and no one knows what the future is going to be, but this is definitely a very interesting time and an interesting part of this shift in both how the government is, what kind of role they're going to play, what the central bank role is going to be. There's kind of this fight over the control of money and control of freedom. I think it's probably some of the most important conversations we can be having, instead of bullshit around $8 check marks. So
there you go.
There you go. So, all right, Brent. Well, look, man, you have a good weekend. I appreciate you popping on. I appreciate everyone who came to join us this week. You can learn more at milkshakespod.com. You can follow us on Twitter, where obviously all the excitement and buzz is happening, at Milkshakes Pod, and you can also find us on YouTube at Milkshakes Pod. Brent, I look forward to catching up with you in a couple days.
All right, man. Have a great weekend. See ya.